Yeah. Now let's look at using a pivot chart. Again, the moment we are able to, wherever we are able to create a pivot table, I can very well use a pivot chart, right? And pivot table becomes more and more handy, especially when I have a text or a finite data in a column, a finite set of data, probably repeated kind of a data. Wherever my data is in a form of a unidimensional table where the headings are there in one row and the data is beneath that. It's a typical database format. So when my data is in this format, I can very well create a pivot table where in the pivot table I look at some headings or the values of, let's say I want to create a pivot table as an analysis on a position as a field. All the values, all the unique values of this opposition, Pakistan, New Zealand and all, they will be displayed as a column heading or a row heading. Similarly, one more column I can put it as a row heading or a column heading, and I can do the summarization at the intersection between the two. So just as a quick usage here, let's say I would like to do the pivot table between or I want to do a summarization the opposition wise and year wise. Year wise and opposition wise, I want to do the analysis for the entire set of people. I want to find the average of or average or something of the Indians based on opposition and the year. So for that purpose, all I am creating is I'll create a pivot table with this entire data. So pivot table creation part is still the same, your regular usage, or you can directly proceed to a pivot chart. Either way is fine. When you are proceeding to a pivot chart directly, it asks me what is the location which we are selecting. So this entire location, and I can very well say where to plot this pivot chart entirely the same way as our pivot table. This entire representation looks like, wherein I can create my analysis, let's say opposition wise. So I drag the opposition, let's say onto this column label. So I put that will give me all the oppositions to the right in one single row. And similarly, let's say the years, I'll drag them into the row label, which is the axis fields layer. So the years I drag it onto this. So what I am seeing is the list of years on this side, all the oppositions on this side. So based on this, if I want to do some kind of a summary, what is the average of the runs scored, or what is the average runs scored against each of these team? Whatever column of the original table, you put it in the axis field or in the legend field. Legend field will show horizontally the values of that column. So because I put opposition here, the values of that opposition column, all unique values, Australia, Bangladesh and all, they are put as column headings. Similarly, when I put year this side, all the unique values of the row are all the unique values of that year column, they are displayed as my headings. Now at the intersection of this is the combination. Okay, 1974 Australia. What do I want? Runs or something. So now what I can do is the runs, I'll drag it into the values. Now it gives me a table. It gives me a table saying, okay, this is actually doing the count of the runs. I don't want the count of the runs, either the summation of the runs or the average of the runs. So probably I'll simply go here and I'll change this value field setting and make it as average of the runs. So what will give me is, okay, for each, okay, 1981 against Australia, this is the average of the team. 1983 against Australia, this is the case. So against all the countries, we see that a big table is plotted and a big report is also prepared and even a big chart is done. But of course, this chart is not giving me any kind of an indication because of so many elements. Now, one way I can think of cleaning that up is put some labels. Let's say I want it only in the last, only for 3 countries. So I am removing this filter. It gives me, if I want some kind of filters by based on some formula or something, I can very well give that. Otherwise, I can very well go here, remove it, and let's say only Australia, England, only 1 or 2, 3, 4 countries if I want to select. Let's say only 4 countries I am trying to select. Now immediately this pivot also, the chart also gets improvised. Now you see his chart is also slightly improved accordingly. But still, yeah, all the years are shown. Now even this side, you can directly try to put, okay, why all the values? You can very well put, okay, we can put a value filter where we can say the year is greater than here the row label, okay, label filter where I am putting greater than, let's say 2000. After 2000 only, whatever the runs that have been scored, I am trying to capture them. So immediately my pivot table became smaller and even the pivot chart has become smaller. Probably this can actually give me the scope to analyze much better. Right, against Australia, yeah, in this year the average is much better. In 2009 or 10, whenever it is, in this period the average is much better, whereas against Pakistan 2012 looks much better. So I can very well do a small kind of an analysis and the pivot table. And the advantage of this model is the moment I am changing my input, even the chart is also getting updated automatically. Right, even if let's say, no, when I say no, I don't want it year wise, only opposition wise I want to see the, so I'll simply remove this year. I don't want it year wise, only against each of these opponents what is the average. So probably I can very well make a conclusion that Indians perform very well against Sri Lanka and probably England in the last 5, 6, in the last 10 years. They are not doing well against these 2 countries. I can get all kinds of reports with all kinds of quickness. Right, even over a period if I want to see, okay, over a period if I am seeing, yes, probably the best performance is against Pakistan here, one against Sri Lanka here and against Pakistan here. I can very well make out that some of the good performances, and there are a lot of worst performances. Against Sri Lanka here there is a worst performance. So some kind of quick analysis can very well be done once I have this kind of a pivot. And in this case, let's say I am doing a pivot based on the years and the opposition. Right? This is a pivot based on years and opposition. Now if I want the graph format to change, okay, now let's say I bring the opposition from here to here. My data goes like this, my graph goes like this. So the graph presentation can directly change depending on the way my data is organized. And let's say if I just condense all this, compress all these things, my graph also get compresses. When I say collapse all, collapse entire field, my graph also becomes as a collapsed graph. So probably I can say 2009 and 11 are the 2 years where the Indians average is much better across these 4 countries put together. So I can very well generate my own outputs. I can generate, and on this I can even write some report which will say this is the year which is having the maximum value. Right, that I'll come to it. But on this chart, At least the chart is directly giving me a kind of a picture, right? So if I see, okay, these are the years where I have crossed 30. The average has crossed 30 for the team as such, as a whole. So the moment you are expanding it here, even your graph also gets expanded like this. So the graph and the pivot table are more or less linked each of the years, right? And let's say, no, I don't want the filtering based on year and opposition, but I also want the filtering to be done based on a player, right? I want the filtering to be done based on the selected player. We have selected that person, whosoever is the player. Now we have already written one formula which says for this for the player selected, we have included some columns. These are for the selected players only. Now what I can do is I can drag this player year or something. This player year will exist only for the selected player. So let's see that. I'll drag this player year onto the report filter. Now this is not the generic one. And in this player year, right now it is selecting all the years. Rather than that, what I'll say is select multiple items. I'll deselect the blank. Rest all I'll select as it is. Okay, this is the, I think the player whom we have selected has not played in the last few years. It got stuck, I think. So this is the player, and for this player, if we look at the pivot table, where I simply do a refresh, the player year, for me, yeah, it is all except the blank. Now it is telling me that these are the numbers for this particular player. No, when we prepared it, this player here, we said if the player name is matching the player name, then only display the year. So corresponding to the player whom we have, the year will be displayed. Only for that player, the year will be displayed. So every time the player name is found in that entire location, the year will be inputted corresponding to it. So all these are corresponding to that player itself, right? So that way we can, we are creating a few additional columns here, but that is helping us out in doing that filtration process. Otherwise, I have to really select the player and every time manually select this is the name of the player. I could have dragged the player name also here. Instead of player here, I could have, again, it's up to us. I could have dragged the player name here. And in the player name, I could have selected only that particular player. Right, whosoever, probably I have to search for that player. And I can very well select that player. So this is the way this particular player has performed in each of the years. So I can get a player wise. So once I have a pivot table in place, the pivot chart is just a linkage of that to the table. So the way the table is moving, the chart also. Probably if I simply drag this opposition this side, now the chart also gets updated accordingly. So it's all linked up to the data. The more and more we are generating the pivot tables in a more dynamic fashion, the pivot chart is also updated in a dynamic fashion. Both are linked together. Right? And again, the same, all kinds of formatting and all these things can very well be done on the pivot chart also, just like the way we do it in any other chart. Removing the backgrounds and all that stuff, and probably do a worksheet format along with this format. All these things will remain one and the same.